What kind of stranger leaves you with a tattoo you didn't ask for? The first time I saw him, he was standing beneath a flickering street lamp, holding an umbrella much too small for the rainstorm that had overtaken the city. My phone was dead, my jacket was thin, and the last bus had already pulled away, leaving me stranded near an unfamiliar corner store I had ducked into for warmth. As I stepped back into the downpour, resigned to getting soaked, he raised his umbrella and, with a crooked smile, asked, "Care to share some shelter?" He looked like someone pulled from a forgotten corner of an art magazine. Jagged tattoos crawled up his neck, a tiny hoop pierced one brow, and his coat, though old, hung on him like it belonged in a gallery. Something about his eyes made me pause. They weren't warm, exactly, but they were open, curious. I nodded. The rain pattered on the fabric as we stood awkwardly close beneath the shared umbrella. "Do you believe in patterns?" he asked suddenly, his voice oddly gentle. I laughed, unsure. "Like, no," he said, tilting his head. "Like, life patterns. Recurring shapes. People appearing at the right, or wrong, moments." I wasn't sure if he was flirting or sermonizing. Before I could answer, he added, "You look like someone I used to draw." It should have creeped me out, and maybe it did, but it was the kind of line that didn't sound rehearsed. Just odd enough to feel true. Maybe it was the rain or the strangeness of the hour, but instead of walking away, I found myself asking, what did they look like? He reached into his coat, pulled out a battered leather sketchbook, and flipped through pages soaked with ink and graphite until he found a pencil drawing of a figure curled on a park bench, hair in a bun like mine, the same droop to the shoulders. I blinked. "That's uncanny." "I drew this a year ago," he said. "And now, here you are." I was drenched, chilled, and weirdly intrigued. "What's your name?" I asked, still staring at the sketch. "You can call me Rook," he said. "No last name, no explanation, just Rook." "Come on," he said after a moment, motioning toward the corner. "There's a place around here with decent coffee. You look like you need something warm." I hesitated, but I didn't say no. As we walked, the rain softened, and for a few seconds, the night held that eerie hush that only comes after a storm has passed. But just before anything starts to feel safe again, the cafe was tucked between a shuttered bookstore and a pawn shop, a narrow sliver of warmth hidden but a fogged-up glass door. A flickering neon sign above it read, "The Nest." Appropriate, I thought, for someone named Rook. Inside, it smelled like burnt cinnamon and old jazz. We took a booth in the back, red vinyl sticking to my damp coat. He ordered for both of us without asking. "2 hazelnut Americanos?" he said to the sleepy barista, then turned to me with that same half-smile. "You look like the kind of person who likes flavor but not too much sweetness." I didn't correct him. I didn't even know if he was right. He slid the sketchbook across the table. "You want to see the rest?" I nodded. Page after page, the drawings ranged from surreal to intimate: a woman with clouds for eyes, a subway car overgrown with ivy, a boy crouched in a phone booth, screaming silently into the receiver. Every image seemed soaked with emotion, grief, longing, nostalgia, sometimes all at once. Then he paused on one page and tapped it with his finger. It was a charcoal drawing of a woman dancing alone in a rainstorm. Her hands were lifted like branches. The lines were chaotic, but the face, it was mine again. Or close enough. I asked, voice low. "I dreamed it," he said. 5 times. Always the same girl, always the same rain. There was no way he could have known I danced in the rain after my graduation party, drunk on cheap wine and freedom. No photos, no witnesses, just me, spinning barefoot on my parents' lawn. "I don't usually believe in fate," I said. "You don't have to," he replied. "It believes in you." His words should have sounded like nonsense, but under the cafe's buzzing lights, they pressed against some soft part of me I didn't know I'd left exposed. He talked for over an hour. About growing up in foster homes, never staying anywhere more than a year. About finding solace in street art, sleeping on rooftops, and how every person he drew seemed to find him again eventually, even if they didn't know it. He called them cues. "You're one of mine," he said. "I just didn't expect you to smile back." I should have left. I had a meeting early the next morning. My hair was still wet. I barely knew this man. But the cafe lights were warm, the coffee surprisingly good, and something about the gravity in his voice made me stay just a little longer. He paid the bill before I noticed, then slid a matchbook across the table. It had an address scribbled inside, no name, just an invitation: Friday 9 p.m., come see yourself. I looked up to ask what it meant. But Roke was already gone, coat flaring like wings as he stepped into the night. I stared at the matchbook all week. It sat on my desk between a stack of reports and a dying succulent daring me to acknowledge it. Every time I tried to throw it away, I hesitated. Something about the handwriting, bold but slanted, like it had been scrawled in a hurry or maybe with too much certainty, kept pulling me back. Friday came fast. I told no one. Not because I was afraid exactly, but because I didn't know what to say. Hey, I'm going to a mystery art show hosted by a guy who dreams of me dancing in the rain, didn't quite roll off the tongue. I arrived at the address 5 minutes early. It was a faded brownstone, partially hidden behind overgrown ivy and graffiti. The porch light flickered as if deciding whether to trust me. I knocked. No answer. I tried the knob unlocked. Inside, it smelled like turpentine and old books. The foyer was dim, lined with empty frames on the walls. I was about to call out when I heard the soft shuffle of footsteps upstairs. Then a voice, his voice, called down, "Second door on the right." I followed. The door creaked as I pushed it open, revealing a studio bathed in amber light. Paintings leaned against every wall, some hanging from exposed brick with nails that looked too delicate to hold their weight. And in the middle of it all, on a rickety easel, was the sketchbook. Only this time, it was open to a page I hadn't seen before. It was a fresh drawing, charcoal hurried lines but unmistakable. It was me. Not just a face, but my entire posture, the curve of my shoulders, the tension I always carried in my neck. I wore the same sweater I had on right now, and in the corner, scribbled hastily, "Found her again." I turned and Rook was there. He held a mug of paint water, sipping it like tea. "You came." I almost didn't. "I know," he said. "That's why I drew you first." I walked slowly around the room. Every painting, every sketch had something uncanny. An expression I'd made, a scar I'd hidden, the shape of my hands when I was thinking too hard. It felt like he'd been watching me longer than was possible, or that he had somehow pulled these pieces from me before we ever met. "You said these were dreams?" I said. "They started as dreams. Then they became memories. Then they started showing up in places I couldn't explain. Like me." He nodded. Then he picked up a worn folder from the table, flipped it open, and pulled out a photograph. It was aged, grainy, maybe from the 90s, a little girl on a swing, her hair in pigtails, her mouth open mid-laugh. He pointed at her. "That's you, right?" It was me at age 6, in a park we used to visit before my parents divorced. The photo had only ever existed in a single family album, locked away in my childhood home. There was no way he could have had a copy. I took a step back. "Where did you get this?" He looked genuinely confused. "I don't remember. It was just with me. In a thrift store sketchpad, in a jacket I bought secondhand. I don't know. Things just come to me." I felt dizzy. "And the drawings? How do you explain those?" He rubbed the back of his neck, suddenly vulnerable. "I can't. I wish I could, but they're always about people I meet later. Always." I sat down. The air in the studio felt thicker now, almost charged. Rook handed me a blank page and a pencil. "Draw something?" he said. "Anything. Let's see what you remember." I didn't know why I did it, but I started sketching. My hand moved faster than I expected. When I stopped, I looked down and realized I had drawn him, standing in the rain, holding that umbrella, looking right at me. Neither of us said anything for a long time. Then he whispered, "Maybe we're both echoes." I didn't sleep the night after the studio visit. My mind raced with images I hadn't meant to recall. Fragments from dreams I barely remembered, familiar yet slippery. Rook's words echoed behind my thoughts, blurring the line between coincidence and something stranger. When Friday turned into Saturday, I felt myself slipping into a fog. Still, by afternoon, I found myself checking the matchbook again. On the inside flap, in smaller writing, was something new. "Next step, if you're ready." And beneath it, a time and another address. This time, there were conditions. He texted me, though I never gave him my number. The message was brief: "Bring nothing. Wear black. Be open." That night, I followed the directions, heart pounding. The address led to an alley behind an abandoned flower shop. A man in a velvet blazer stood at a heavy door. When I said, "Rook invited me," he nodded and handed me a blindfold. "You'll put it on once you're inside," he said. I almost turned around, but something tethered me. Curiosity, recklessness, maybe both. Inside, the hallway was dim, lit only by flickering bulbs hidden in bird cages. I slipped the blindfold over my eyes as instructed. A pair of hands, gentle but firm, guided me forward. I could hear muffled music, low laughter, the clink of glass. A woman's voice whispered, "Welcome to the threshold." Before pushing open a heavy curtain, the air shifted. Without sight, my senses sharpened, the scent of candle wax and paint, the softness of velvet under my hands, footsteps on concrete, whispers everywhere. Then, silence. A chair was pressed against the backs of my legs. I sat, the air around me buzzed with quiet movement, then the unmistakable hum of a tattoo machine. I stiffened. No one had mentioned this. A voice leaned in close, Rook's voice, quiet and steady. "You said you wanted to see yourself. This is how." My breath caught. "You're gonna tattoo me? Now? It's part of the exhibit?" he said. "You're not just a guest, you're a subject." "Where?" "Your left shoulder blade. Just a symbol. Small. Personal." I should have said no. I should have demanded the blindfold be removed. But something in me, some reckless, tired, strange part, whispered, "Why not?" The needle bit into my skin. Not painful, just intense. I tried to track time, but it slipped sideways. Maybe minutes passed, maybe hours. As the buzzing stopped, I felt a warm cloth press against the fresh ink. A pause, then a kiss? Barely a whisper. On my temple? You're part of it now? He said. They led me out the way I came, still blindfolded. When I stepped onto the street again, the air felt colder. I pulled off the blindfold. The alley was empty, no sign of a door, no music, just brick, graffiti, and silence. I didn't sleep that night either. The morning light revealed nothing new. Just the usual mess of my apartment and the growing unease I couldn't shake. My shoulder blade throbbed gently beneath the bandage. I hadn't even looked at it yet. I stood in front of the bathroom mirror for a long time before finally peeling the gauze away. At first, it looked abstract, just a swirl of lines and dots, like a celestial compass. But the longer I stared, the more it seemed to move. Not literally, of course, but the design shifted depending on how I looked at it. In some angles, it was a storm cloud. In others, a broken heart. And in one brief moment, I saw my own eyes reflected back in its lines. The signature at the base, 3 small dots and a slash, was Roke's. He had etched his name into me. I texted the number from before, even though I had no confirmation it belonged to him. What did you put on me? No reply. Later that day, I received a package at my doorstep, no label. Inside, a Polaroid of me in the tattoo chair, still blindfolded mid-tattoo. The image was haunting, intimate, vulnerable. And it wasn't just me in the frame. Behind me, in the shadows, stood at least 6 other people watching. Faceless, all in black. The back of the photo had a single phrase scrawled in ink. You were seen. My phone buzzed seconds later with an unknown number. The night gallery opens only once. You were lucky. That evening, I went to the address from the night before. It didn't exist. Where there had been a building, there was now a vacant lot, overgrown with weeds and strewn with old bricks. No flower shop, no alley, no door. As if the place had been erased, or had never been there to begin with. For days, I kept checking over my shoulder. I saw flashes of murals I couldn't explain, a girl beneath a streetlight, a woman with a storm swirling in her chest, a blindfolded figure etched in detail on an underpass wall. All looked like me. All bore the same 3 dots and slash in the corner. The city had turned into a gallery and I was on display. I began to feel watched, though no one ever approached me. I deleted my social media, closed the curtains. Still, every walk through a new street brought more of Rook's work. More versions of me, fragmented, distorted, turned into symbols. I called a friend, someone removed from it all, and asked them to look for any art events, underground galleries, anything connected to a Rook. Nothing. No mention online. No flyers. No reviews. Like it had been a one-night hallucination shared only by me. Then came the message, slipped under my door in an envelope. No stamp. Handwritten. Some muses are meant to vanish. But you stayed. That makes you sacred. It made me feel less flattered, more trapped. The idea of being sacred haunted me. What did that even mean to him? Was I a symbol, a vessel, or just a convenient canvas for whatever vision he believed he was chasing? The silence stretched for weeks. No more messages, no strange packages, no murals appearing overnight. I tried to return to normal, work, coffee shops, reading before bed, but something had shifted. My reflection looked older. My sleep was thin and riddled with dream versions of myself running through endless corridors, always blindfolded, always looking back at something I couldn't see. Then, one gray Saturday, I ran into him again, not on purpose. It was a street fair, crowded, noisy, full of music and food stalls. I was standing in line for a mango lemonade when I turned and saw him leaning against a mural he'd clearly just finished painting. The paint was still wet. His hair was longer, pulled back in a knot. He wore a denim jacket I recognized from a sketch in his book. He hadn't changed. Or rather, he had changed in that imperceptible way people do when you haven't seen them in a long time. They feel both new and painfully familiar. He saw me at once. Didn't smile. Just nodded, almost like we'd passed each other on a trail deep in the woods. I walked over. I thought you vanished. I did, he said. But vanishing isn't the same as disappearing. He gestured to the mural. It was a cityscape but warped as if viewed through heat or tears. And in the corner was a figure, arms raised, like she was trying to stop a storm. She looked like me again. I didn't ask if it was. Instead, I said, why me? He rubbed a smudge of paint from his wrist. You came to the gallery. You said yes. That changes the bond. Bond? He finally met my eyes. I don't just tattoo people. I mark transitions. Turning points you don't always know when they're happening, but your skin does. You were ready to change. That night you let go of who you were. I was stunned by the conviction in his voice. He believed it. He reached into his bag and pulled out a small notebook. You should see this, he said, handing it over. It's part of the second project. Inside were photos, sketches, ink rubbings. All of them were of people with tattoos, strangers with strange, abstract marks. All bore the 3 dot slash somewhere in the image. Some were on wrists, some on backs, some near the heart. A collective of unknowing participants. You're one of the few who came back, he said. Most run, or try to scrub it away, or pretend it never happened. What happens if I keep it? He shrugged. You remember. That's all. I stood there, the weight of the moment pressing in, and then I asked something I hadn't planned to. Would you do it again? He paused. Then, slowly, he nodded. Yes. But not the same tattoo? What then? He took a Sharpie from his pocket and gently reached for my hand. I let him. He drew a tiny shape on the inside of my wrist, a wave with a single star above it. What does it mean? I asked. It means you're no longer a canvas. You're a collaborator now. I left without saying goodbye, but I didn't throw the notebook away. The notebook stayed on my shelf for days before I opened it again. I wasn't sure what I expected, answers maybe, clarity. But the more I studied it, the more questions bloomed instead. Each image inside felt intimate, like stolen diary entries from people I'd never met. The tattoos weren't decorative, they were messages, puzzles. On one page, a pair of wings fractured by a crack. On another, an eye bleeding ink, all connected by the same symbol, 3 dots and a slash. The deeper I went, the more I felt the itch, an urge to return to Rook's world, to see it again, not just as a subject but as something more. He had planted something in me that night. A strange seed, and now it was growing. One afternoon as I walked home from work, I passed a small studio wedged between a laundromat and a liquor store. The windows were painted black except for one word on the glass, ITAR AL. I stopped. Something about the lettering felt familiar. Inside, it was quiet. A few paintings hung along the walls, abstract, heavy, painful in texture. One canvas had what looked like a mouth frozen mid-scream, surrounded by what might have been feathers or flames. Another showed a human silhouette dissolving into birds. And then I saw him. Rook stood at the far end, cleaning brushes. He turned before I could say anything, as if he'd sensed me. You came, he said, not smiling. I was hoping you would. I didn't plan to, I replied. But here I am. He nodded and motioned toward a stool. I sat. You still have the first one? He asked. Gesturing to my shoulder, I nodded. Still there. He handed me a small mirror and turned me gently to face another on the wall. Take a look. I lifted my shirt slightly and stared at the ink. It had changed. What had once been abstract lines now looked sharper, more deliberate, almost alive. The swirl of lines had shifted subtly into the outline of 2 figures, one drawing the other. I stared at it, stunned. It adapts, Rook said softly. Not literally, of course. But as you change, so does your perception of it. That's what this project's about. He held up a new stencil. A fresh design. This one was simpler, a small bird flying out of a hand. This would go on your forearm, he said. If you wanted it? I hesitated. What does it mean? I asked. It means release. You can be seen without being owned. You can remember without staying stuck. It took me a long time to nod, but I did. The process was quieter this time. No blindfold, no audience. Just the hum of the needle and Rook's breath, steady as he worked. The pain was sharp but grounding. When it was over, he wiped the area gently and leaned back. There, he said. No, you've marked your own story. We sat in silence after that. He pulled out his own sketchbook and turned to a page I hadn't seen before. It was me, again. But this time, I wasn't dancing or hiding. I was sitting just like now, arms folded, tattoos exposed, eyes open. You drew this today, I'd asked. No, he said. Weeks ago. I didn't ask how. Instead, I watched him put the book away and say nothing more. He never asked for money, never offered a next step. I left the studio feeling heavy, but not in a bad way. Like I had taken something back I hadn't known was missing. I woke up in a room I didn't recognize. The walls were white but cracked in places, their paint peeling like sunburned skin. Light filtered in through a high window, casting long shadows on the bare floorboards. My shoulder ached, so did my forearm, the tattoos. But the door was locked. I sat up quickly, heart thundering. I was still dressed, shoes and all. No phone, no bag, no watch. Just a single object resting on the ground beside the bed, a round mirror, framed in chipped wood, angled upward. Taped to it was a note. You are part of the canvas now. The phrase struck me cold. I stood and paced the small room. No obvious cameras. No sounds from beyond the door. Just a small vent near the ceiling and a single bulb overhead, flickering like it might go out at any moment. The walls were bare except for no, not bare. There were faint impressions. Scratches, paint smears. Almost invisible unless you looked closely. They were outlines of people. Figures frozen mid-step. Faces half-formed, like ghostly blueprints of someone trying to escape. I went to the mirror again. My reflection looked pale, disheveled. But there was something else. My tattoos glowed faintly in the dull light. The one on my shoulder, the original mark, looked different again, like the figures in it had turned to face each other. And the bird on my forearm seemed to move slightly when I turned my wrist. I wasn't panicking, not exactly, more suspended. Then I noticed something else, an air current near the vent. Faint but consistent. I dragged the thin mattress under it, stood on top, and pried at the edges. The cover was loose. After minutes of fumbling, I managed to remove the grill. Behind it was a crawl space barely large enough to slide into. I hesitated. But the idea of staying in that white room, of being studied, displayed, turned into another shadow on the wall. It was worse than the tight passage ahead. I climbed in. The metal scraped my elbows and knees as I moved. It was dark, dusty. I couldn't see more than a foot ahead. But I kept crawling, following the air current, hoping it meant somewhere open. Eventually, I saw light, faint, yellow, flickering. I emerged into another room. This one was larger, warmer. A studio space. Murals covered the walls, some incomplete. Tables lined with brushes and ink bottles. In the center, a tall canvas featuring a figure mid-stride, cloak billowing behind her, arms marked with tattoos. It was me again. But this time, the figure was painted in gold leaf, luminous under the studio lights. And just beyond the canvas, on a shelf, my phone, my bag, everything I'd had before, intact. I grabbed them quickly, breath shaking. On the wall beside the exit, a final message was scrawled in charcoal. The cage was never locked. But the art had to be finished. I left without looking back. Outside, the world looked exactly the same. People passed by, cars honked. Somewhere nearby, music played from a cracked window, but I felt changed, altered. Like the canvas he painted was no longer just a piece of art. Like I had been reconstructed from the inside out. Freedom, once I tasted it again, felt disorienting. I walked for hours that day, unable to go home just yet. My hands shook even when I tried to drink water. The city looked brighter but unfamiliar, like someone had adjusted the contrast in a photo too high. Every stranger's glance lingered too long. Every mural on the side of a building felt like a message, especially the ones that looked like me. Because they did. The first I found under a bridge I rarely passed. It showed a woman crouched in a puddle, her face fragmented by reflections. Across her shoulder blade, my exact tattoo, and near her feet, scattered matchbooks. Then another, along a brick wall near the old bookstore, the figure standing under an umbrella, rain falling in streaks of silver. But this time, the man wasn't Rook, it was me. The eyes, the mouth, the posture. He had begun painting me into his role. I stopped in the middle of the sidewalk, heart pounding. A man walking his dog muttered something behind me, annoyed I was in the way. I moved mechanically, turning down alleyways I hadn't seen in years. And each one, had something, a partial sketch. A graffiti figure with my scarf, a painting of a blindfolded woman reaching for a bird. I wasn't paranoid, I was haunted. It wasn't just the image of me, it was the evolution. The changes in posture, expression, setting. He had chronicled me like I was his autobiography. And worse, other people were seeing these every day, without knowing the story behind them, without knowing me. I tried to report it. I printed out photos, brought them to the local arts office, even filed a complaint with the city's street art maintenance board. Do you know, the clerk asked, blinking slowly. No, I admitted. Any verified identity? I have drawings, photos, a sketchbook. She looked at me with polite concern. We can't remove public art unless it contains hate speech or explicit imagery. These are me. I snapped. This is my face. My body? She tilted her head. Can you prove that? I wanted to scream. Instead, I left with a copy of the city's mural policy and a warning not to attempt defacing the art myself. I began photographing each piece I found, geotagging them, saving the files in a hidden folder. But the more I collected, the more elusive the images became. Some vanished within days of appearing, whitewashed or painted over. Others seemed to mutate, colors shifting, outlines redrawn. One wall showed my face half submerged in water. 2 days later, the same mural showed only ripples where my face had been. It was like he knew I was looking. Eventually, I stopped trying to trace them all. It felt like a trap, one I didn't know how to escape. Then, weeks later, I received a message on a slip of paper folded into a book at a used bookstore I frequented. I hadn't told anyone I was coming. The note read, "You were never alone in the gallery. Others remember too. They want to speak." A number was scrawled beneath it. I dialed it that night. A woman answered. Her voice was hushed, uncertain. "I wondered how long it would take," she said. "You were part of the Threshold show, weren't you?" "Yes," I whispered.
"So was I,"
she said. And not by choice. Her name was Eliza and her voice trembled even when she tried to sound calm. We met the next evening in a quiet corner of a botanical garden just outside the city. She wore sunglasses, despite the fading light, and a scarf wrapped tightly around her neck. When she removed it, I saw the mark. Not a tattoo, at least, not a traditional one. It was a brand. A dark, raised scar shaped like the edge of a broken compass. "He called it an imprint," she said, tracing it absently. "Said it would help me remember my role." "Your role," she nodded. "He said we were part of a larger design? That some people aren't meant to be looked at but through." That's what he believed. Or what he told us. I listened, heart thudding. The phrase "looked at but through" made something twist in my gut. "There are others," she continued. "Not many. Some disappeared after the show. Some covered their marks and left the country. One jumped off a bridge." I swallowed hard. "But you're still here," I said. "Because I found the archive," she said, pulling a USB drive from her coat pocket. That night, I plugged it into my laptop with shaking hands. It was full of video files, silent footage mostly, clips of gallery spaces, studio sessions, blurred faces being tattooed or marked, eyes closed, expressions blank. A few clips showed Rook himself, mid-speech, addressing a small circle of people in black clothes. His voice was low, reverent. He spoke of transformation, of pain as a tool of remembrance, of art as an act of erasure. "We are not what we say we are," he said in one grainy clip. "We are what others imprint onto us. The mark is proof of witness. You are not your name, you are your pattern." I clicked through more folders, photos of sketches, newspaper clippings, redacted documents, even police reports of missing persons tied to street art scenes. In one folder, I found scanned pages of a journal that wasn't Rook's. Handwriting different, messier, rushed. It belonged to someone named Theo, one of his former collaborators. The entries painted a darker picture. "He doesn't sleep. He draws until his hands bleed. He says he's chasing the last image. That when he finds it, he'll vanish for good. He branded Eliza while she was unconscious. Said it wasn't a violation. Said it was reverence. We're not artists anymore. We're relics. We carry pieces of him and he thinks that makes us sacred." I shut the laptop. The room felt smaller now, air thick. Rook hadn't just seen us. He had claimed us, turned us into extensions of himself. Some worshipped him for it. Others ran. A few were trying to fight back. But where did that leave me? I looked down at my forearm, at the bird flying from the hand. Was I still flying away? Or was I already part of the pattern? The next day, I returned to a mural I hadn't visited in weeks. It was still there. My face now painted over with gold leaf, eyes closed, tears like thread falling from them. Beneath it, someone had scribbled a question in chalk. "Where did you go?" It wasn't signed, but I knew it was for me, and I wasn't going to answer it just yet. Not until I found Rook again. I found him where the city breaks into ocean. The pier was quiet that evening, sun melting into the sea, air thick with salt and seagulls. The sky above was streaked in orange and bruised blue like a painting half finished. I walked slowly, the creak of wood beneath my feet steadying my nerves. He was there, leaning against the railing, barefoot, his coat tossed beside him. His hair whipped in the wind, longer now, streaked with a bit of gray. For a moment he didn't turn. He just stared out at the water as if waiting for something to rise from it. "You came," he said without looking at me. "You left me in a locked room," I replied. "You painted my life on every corner of this city. What did you think I would do?" Now he turned. "I thought maybe you'd understand," he said, "that it wasn't about you. Not really. Not just you." "Don't give me that," I snapped. "You used me. You branded people. You convinced them they were echoes. Like that gave you the right." His eyes didn't flinch. But his voice dropped low, heavy with something that sounded almost like regret. "I didn't want to hurt anyone," he said. "I never meant for it to become this. The art used me too. It takes... That's what no one tells you. You start with vision and it turns into compulsion. Then stop," I said. "You can choose to stop." He laughed quietly. "You think I haven't tried? I've burned sketchbooks. I've locked myself away. But the images come anyway. The dreams. The hands that won't rest." He reached into his coat and pulled out something small, a photo. He handed it to me. It was a picture of him standing in front of a wall-sized mural. In the mural, arms covered in tattoos, all of them familiar. The one on his wrist was mine. "I marked myself with your name," he said softly. 3 years ago, before we ever met." The photo shook slightly in my hands. "Why?" "Because you were in the dreams. Always. You under rain, you blindfolded, you breaking the mirror." I took a step back. "Did you ever think," I asked, "that maybe you were just sick, that all of this, me, the others, the gallery, maybe it was obsession, not fate?" He looked down. "I think about that every day," he whispered. "But it doesn't stop the visions, and it doesn't erase what I did." I watched him for a long moment. The tide crashed below us, the horizon glowed. He looked tired. Not in a manipulative way, not in the way I had feared, but in the way people look when they know they've lost the thread of something that once gave them purpose. "I wanted to find beauty in pain," he said. "But maybe I just left pain behind me, everywhere I went." Neither of us spoke for a while. He reached into his bag again and handed me a key. "Studio's yours now, if you want it. I've left everything." I didn't ask where he was going. And he didn't tell me. He just stepped away from the railing, walked down the pier, and vanished into the curve of the shoreline. I never saw him again. I waited a week before I used the key. Part of me thought the studio would be empty, swept clean, wiped of any trace he had ever existed. But when I arrived, the door creaked open to reveal the same chaotic universe of canvases and journals and inks in cracked jars, still smelling of turpentine and memory. His sketchbooks lined one wall, each labeled with dates and cryptic phrases. "The Girl Before Rain," "Echo Chamber," "False Horizons." I sifted through them slowly, page by page. Some were full of figures I didn't recognize. Other muses, other strangers. But in nearly every book, I reappeared. Sometimes hidden in the background, sometimes just an outline or a hand. Other times, full portraits with annotations scribbled along the borders. Knows more than she admits. Does not flee. Why? Carries history in her posture. In the far corner of the studio, behind a curtain, I found the last piece, a canvas taller than me, draped in black cloth. I pulled it free, breath shallow. It was unfinished, but it was me, standing alone on a cliff, wind tearing through my clothes, the ocean swirling below. But I wasn't small or fearful. I looked resolve. My tattoos shimmered in the paint, bright as constellations. At the bottom of the canvas was a phrase etched faintly in pencil. She walked out of the frame. The next day, I called Eliza. I think I understand now, I told her. It wasn't about being seen. It was about being found and deciding who gets to keep you. She met me at the studio later that week, and together we began to catalog the materials. We reached out to others, those who had been part of the gallery who still bore the marks, the scars, the questions. Some wanted to forget, but some came, and together we decided not to destroy what Roque left behind, but to reshape it, to reclaim it. The studio became something else. We painted over the old canvases, layer by layer, letting new stories emerge. We invited people in not to be subjects, not to be muses, but to be artists, co-creators. We made sure no one worked alone. I painted over the mural nearest my apartment, the one with my gold leaf face. I replaced it with a garden, wild and tangled, full of creatures taking flight. In the center, a hand reaching out, not to hold or claim, but to offer. And beneath it, one final symbol, a single bird, in flight. A year passed. Seasons turned like pages, each one softer than the last. I moved slowly through that time, first as if through water, then air, and finally, ground. The sensation of being watched faded, not because I was forgotten, but because I had begun to own the gaze. I kept the tattoo, both of them, actually. The stormy swirl on my shoulder and the bird in flight on my forearm. They no longer felt like someone else's marks. They were mine now, etched into skin that had changed with me, softened in places, strengthened in others. The studio grew. Eliza and I opened it officially 6 months after Roque vanished. We called it Threshold, not in homage to what it was, but to reclaim what it could mean, a crossing, a conscious step forward. People came with stories, some whispered, some shouted. We listened. We taught. We offered ink, yes, but only if the person chose every line. No more blindfolds. No more sacred wounds. One of the first visitors was Theo, the one who had kept the journal I found in the archive. He had a beard now, paint-streaked hands, and eyes that wouldn't meet mine at first. But he thanked me. Said the studio had helped him sleep again. Roque wasn't evil, he said one day, tracing his finger over a new sketch. But he didn't know how to stop. He thought obsession was devotion. I nodded, understanding more than I wanted to admit. There were nights when I still dreamed of the locked room, of mirrors and messages and soft footsteps in galleries of smoke and ink. But I always woke up to light now, and the gentle sound of brushes clinking in jars. I painted my own story eventually. It hung near the door of the studio, a canvas of the city, fragmented and humming, full of half-built bridges and tangled streets, and in the center a figure mid-step, eyes open, arms outstretched, me, walking forward, no longer a muse, not just a survivor, a creator. These stories show the consequences and limits of trusting strangers. What began as a shared umbrella and a sketchbook turned into an intimate, disorienting plunge into someone else's vision. One that blurred consent, identity, and control. Roque believed he was creating something eternal, but in his pursuit of beauty and meaning, he crossed boundaries he didn't fully understand. And while he left behind pieces of himself in murals and marks, those of us who survived had to decide what to carry forward. I lost a part of my anonymity. I lost the simplicity of a quiet life, but I gained a deeper understanding of the self, of agency, creation, and the power of saying no, or yes, on my own terms. If you've ever met a stranger who changed the course of your life, good or bad, I invite you to share your story below. And if you found something here that stirred you, don't forget to subscribe.